Professor Krugman.
Good morning.
You have probably seen the decision of our government to take over a Chinese-owned steel maker to keep domestic production alive. Is that a good decision economically?
I'm afraid, my Economics 101 free trade hat says, well, maybe we shouldn't have the government so involved. But given the reality that China is, as I just saw the tail end of your previous segment, that Chinese firms aren't exactly firms in the way they are in the West. They really aren't independent. I'm afraid that it probably does make sense.
In the United States, there's a kind of a market growing for protectionism, isn't there? Particularly in the Rust Belt. Now, what we're talking about here is our temporary measures, I guess. Our business secretary tried to argue to me this morning to protect communities. Is there a case for that in our country and in yours?
Well, let's be clear about what's happening in the United States. This policy, these drastic tariffs, which keep on changing every few days, are not coming out of some broad political movement. The constituency for what's happening is basically the mind of Donald Trump. There really was no organized movement. Most people really dislike the tariffs. So this is really just one man, and the structure of U.S. law happens to give the president enormous discretion to set tariffs, which was based on the idea that presidents would be more responsible, more concerned with the common interest than Congress people responding to lobbying groups. And that's, that was then, and we're now in a different world as far as that's concerned. There is a big case. There's a good case for trying to help distressed regions, which is what governed policies under the previous administration. We had not so much tariffs as industrial policies, subsidies that were designed partly for national security grounds, partly on climate grounds, but also were targeted towards left behind regions of the United States. And there's a lot of good reasons for that. These tariffs are not targeted. Among other things, we had one drastic change in tariffs, which was announced 11 days ago, and then a complete change, equally drastic tariffs in the aggregate, but totally different in who was targeted a week later. And we've just had a bunch of those tariffs now removed. So just 3 days after the second announcement. So I don't know, we seem to be on course to a world in which U.S. trade policy changes every day, maybe eventually every 3 hours. So, this is not calling it something, trying to pretend that it's something coherent is, as we've been, the phrase of the day in the United States is sane washing. There is no coherence there.
I'm not an economist, but if I were to translate what you've just told me, it's sort of saying he's making it up as he goes along. Surely not.
That's for the technical term would be, he's just winging it. And I said the other technical term is, and the rest of the world is really pissed off at the result.
What do you make of his decision to exempt tech products from the tariffs, which was announced yesterday? What is the significance of that?
Well, the first thing, there's three things. One is that it's, consumer products are exempted, but inputs are not. So as some people have been pointing out, if you want to import a battery from China and then use it in U.S. manufacturing, it faces a high tariff. But if you import a battery inside a Chinese laptop, then it's much lower tariff. And so this is actually in many ways probably discourages U.S. manufacturing instead of encouraging it. This is not something that is helpful to U.S. manufacturing. The second problem is the instability of policy. We just had a radical change in trade policy 3 days after the last radical change. How can any business make plans? Who's going to invest? What you want to sit on your cash rather than invest, because you have no idea what the policy environment will look like, not only next year, but next week. And the last part is that it's impossible not to think about the large contributions that Apple and others made to the Trump inaugural and all of that. So this is the United States taking a giant step towards crony capitalism, towards a world in which business success depends upon currying favor and buying favor with the government. all of a sudden, we become start to look like the political economy of a developing country.
Well, you said that it's in a way in his mind, but of course, it looked like last week that there was one force that may sway him, and that is the market. Are you in the school of thought that says perhaps the markets, people talk about bond markets, equities, whichever it is, that the markets are just too powerful?
Well, I don't think, I mean, in this case, to say it's hard to say that the markets are a malign force. They may have been in other circumstances, but in this case, what we're really seeing is the markets responding to erratic, ill-conceived, crazy policies. Now, there have been times when we've objected to markets, but wow, I mean, if the president abruptly announces the biggest tariffs since 1930, and then abruptly changes them radically, and then changes them again. I mean, the bond market is more important than the stock market. The stocks are, as my old teacher Paul Samuelson said, the stock market has predicted 9 of the last 5 recessions, but the bond market is a better signal. And the bond market at this point is reflecting the true insanity of U.S. policy. So if that acts as some restraint, that's a good thing.
You've been a long-time columnist in a famous liberal newspaper, which you gave up recently. But I think you would describe yourself as a political liberal. No doubt that you're influential with mainstream Democrats. But right now, from this side of the Atlantic, it's looking as though the Democrats are incapable of providing effective opposition to Mr. Trump. What actually went wrong for the Democrats?
Oh, to a large extent. I mean, there's a lot of debating and were they too concerned with wokeness and all of that? But I think, look, every incumbent government in the Western world that had an election last year lost it. I mean, it doesn't matter if it was a moderately liberal government in the United States that lost the election. In your country, it was a conservative government that lost the election. The fact of the matter was that voters everywhere were very annoyed, upset about the inflation, even though the inflation rate had fallen, prices were substantially higher than they had been a few years earlier, and people were annoyed. And then there's this general rattled sense. You kind of remember that Trump won the popular vote by just over a percentage point. I mean, that was not a landslide victory by any standard. And so now at the moment, given the extreme unity of Republicans, Democrats can't do much to stop his agenda. But if we were to hold another election today, certainly if we were to hold we have midterm legislative elections next year, which if they are reasonably fair, which is in question, but if they are fair at the moment, look like a blowout for the Democrats. So to say that the Democrats are in deep trouble, they lost an election in a year when every incumbent party lost election.
Paul Krugman, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.